All right, we are up to our next unit, which is the end of Perek Hay. Little episode, 3 verses long, with the conversation that takes place, and it's 3 verses long, but as we'll see, it's a little bit longer, and it's probably one of the most dramatic moments in the Sefer. Everything before us to unfold. Let's see what's going on. So the last thing we did, we talked about Pesach, and we talked about Milah, and then this verse 12 we didn't really discuss at length, but it's just interesting that the day after Pesach, the eating of the produce of the land, there's a lot of halachic discussion about that. I'm going to leave it for now, and then we get to Pasuk Yud Gimel. Vayhi biyot Yehoshua biricho. When it came to be when Yehoshua was near Yericho or at Yericho, Vayisa enav vayar והנה איש עומד לנגדו, וחרבו שלופה בידו. He saw a man standing opposite him, over him, with a sword drawn. Now you are the chief of staff, you have an army behind you, and you are ready to march on Yericho, and there stands a man with a sword. So that's an odd vision or odd moment. Vayelech Yehoshua elav, vayomer lo. Yehoshua goes over to him and he says to him, Halanu ata im litzarenu. Are you for us, or are you with our enemies? Or in the language of the vernacular, identify yourself, friend or foe. Who are you? Halanu ata im litzarenu. Are you for us or against us? A strange man standing there with the sword. He says, you either get out of our way or help us, but you are standing in our way. Vayomer lo. So he says, no, you misunderstand completely. Ki ani sar tzva Hashem, ata bati. I am the captain of the army of God. Sar tzva Hashem, ministering angel, let's call it, of the army of Hashem. Atabati, I have come now. Vayipol Yehoshua al panav arza, vayishtachu. Yehoshua realized who and what he was talking to. He fell on his face. He bowed. Vayomer lo, and he said to him, Ma adoni medaber al avdo. What does my master say to his servant? Well, suddenly the tone changes, right? From identify yourself, friend or foe, to falling on your face, bowing. What does my master say to his servant? Vayomer sar tzva Hashem al Yehoshua. Sar tzva Hashem says to Yehoshua, Shal nalcha me'al raglecha ki hamakom asher ata omed alav kodeshu. Take your shoes off from your feet, for the place you stand is holy. Yes, Yehoshua came, and Yehoshua did so. And that's the end of the chapter. Really remarkable conversation, if you think about it. There's this vision, this Sar Tzva Hashem, which clearly is a malach of some kind, and he's standing there with a sword. Yehoshua doesn't know, he thinks he's talking to an ish, and he says, well, friend or foe, identify yourself, what's the password? And he says, no, and Sar Tzva Hashem bat, the atabat, they've come now. Yehoshua bows down, he says to him, take your shoes off. Sounds familiar, right? It kind of immediately conjures reminiscent of the parallel to the story of Moshe at the burning bush. Take your shoes off from your feet, for the land you stand on is holy ground. And that seems to be the end of the story. Except that it's not really. It might be the end of the story. Yeah, that is certainly possible. And if I stopped here, what would be the message of the Malach? This is the end of the chapter. What essentially would be the message of the Malach? He seems to be coming to tell Yehoshua that the land that he's standing on somehow is holy ground. I'm not quite sure why Yericho is holier ground than anywhere else in the land of Israel. That's a question to be determined. Is he referring to Yericho? Is he referring to the land of Israel? Is he referring to just that place, like the burning bush? What is the and if his purpose is to, in some way, reward Yehoshua for the spiritual achievements of the Brit Milah and of the Korban Pesach, if you remember, after Abraham's bris, he also had a vision of angels who came to him. And the Ramban, the beginning of Parshat Vayera, says that that was a reward for the achievement of Brit Milah. Why does he have to be a Sar Tzva Hashem? Why do he have to be a ministering angel, the army of God? We don't even know what that means, but we'll unpack that a little later here. And why does he have to have a sword drawn? It's very strange. The truth is that one of the reasons it's so strange is because we tend to look at Tanakh by chapters, which is an odd way to look at Tanakh. In fact, there is a reality is that our Masoret of Tanakh, our tradition of the reading of Tanakh, or the structure of Tanakh, does not divide into chapters. That was invented by the Christian Bible. Our Masoret, if you will, our tradition of how to divide Tanakh, has paragraphs. And if I stop here, I'm stopped in the middle of a paragraph. I don't know if you've ever noticed in the bottom of these pages of Al Torah, it tells you that the text here is taken from the text of the Tanakh, Mikra Pi HaMasorah. So just to show you what that means, because it's hard to see it on this text, if I look at the Masorah here, I click on this link, I get, this is the same Tanakh, same structure, same font, but divided by the paragraphs of a traditional Tanakh. If you looked at a Koran Tanakh, these are the paragraphs you would see. What we refer to as Parshiot, Ptuchot, Stumot, open and closed paragraphs, but these are the paragraph divisions. That's an open paragraph, this is a closed paragraph, whatever. I'm not going to get into the Pei and the Samach, but this is exactly the text I just read to you. Sees a man with the sword drawn, he says to, are you friend or foe? I am the ministering angel of God. Yehoshua falls on his face and he says, what do you say? And he says, Sar Tzva Hashem. And Yehoshua, he said, this Sar Tzva Hashem says to Yehoshua, take your shoes off because the place you stand is holy. V'yas Yehoshua ken. We're not finished with the paragraph. Because chapter 6, verse 1, in the chapter division, is the end of the paragraph in the Masoret division. You follow what I'm saying? So it continues, V'yiricho sogeret umsugeret, en yotzei, mipnei bnei Yisrael, en yotzei, ve'en ba. Yericho is completely surrounded, enclosed, besieged, Israel, right? Besieging Yericho. En yotzei ve'en ba. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out. Why does nobody come out? Because Israel is besieging her. Why does nobody go in? Why have they not started the march on Yericho? Because there's something in their way. What's in their way? Ministering angel of God with the fiery sword, Sar Tzva Hashem, with the chabosh lufa biyado. So we call this a standoff. Israel's on the outside, Yeshua's on the inside. In between is this malach. Vayihi biyot Yehoshua b'Yericho. When Yehoshua was in Yericho, at Yericho, or besieging Yericho, sogeret u'musogeret b'nei Yisrael, there's a standoff because in between stands the malach. Stands the Sar Tzva Hashem. And now suddenly the whole story seems to take on a different character, a different question. What is the message of this Sar Tzva Hashem? What is he coming to do? What is he coming to say? What is his purpose? And so suddenly the fact that I divide the chapters I understand if I divide the chapters by chapter division, this story of this angel is nothing to do with Yericho. He is about the previous story of the Bris Milah and the Korban Pesach and the spiritual attainment and holy ground, and maybe Gilgal is the holy place because that's where their camp was, and this is just nothing to do with Yericho. And we go to chapter 6 and we talk about Yericho. But according to the Masoret, this Malach is sandwiched between two verses referring to Yehoshua at Yericho, which tells me that there's something about the Malach and the story of Yericho. So working off that assumption, now let's continue into chapter 6 and see where that gets us. Everybody see what I just did with this little digression into the Masoret? Very important. So continuing in chapter 6 as if we're reading the same story. Nobody goes in, nobody goes out. Maybe it's because of the siege of Israel. Maybe because of the Malach, which I'm suggesting. Vayomer Hashem al Yehoshua. God spoke to Yehoshua and said to him, I will give Yericho into your hands and its king, even the mighty warriors of Yericho. Here are the instructions. V'sabotem et ha'ir kol anshe ha'milchama, hakef et ha'ir parmachat. Take all of your warriors and go surround the city and circuit around the city one time. Kol ta'aseh sheshit yamim. And you'll do this for 6 days. And for each circuit, what we refer to as a hakafa, for each hakif et ha'ir, for each hakafa around the city, Shiva Kohanim Yisu Shiva Shofarot Hayovlim Lifnei Haaron. 7 priests shall carry 7 ram horns. Yovel is a ram, a shofar is a horn. Shofrot Hayovlim before the ark. Uvayom HaShvi'i, on the 7th day, Tasobu et ha'ir Sheva Pamim. And you're going to do 7 circuits. Structure sound familiar? Right. Shana Rabbah, some Torah, right? 7 days. Shana Rabbah, really 7 days, 7 hakafot. Each day is a single hakaf, and the 7th day you're going to do 7 hakafot. The Kohanim yitku'u b'shofarot, and then the Kohanim are going to start to blow the shofar. Ve'aya bimshoch b'keren hayovel, when you blast that shofar, b'kishama'achem et kol hashofar, when you hear the ram's horn, yariu kol ha'am t'ruah gdolah, let the people shout. And between the sound of the shofar and the people shouting, the walls of the city will simply collapse beneath itself. And then the people can go in, surrounding the city from all sides. They can go in and they can take care of what they need to take care of. So you have a formula for the creation of an earthquake. If anybody wants to know how to create an earthquake, then you do 7 hakafot with kohanim and shofars, a little bit of yelling, and boom, you have an earthquake. And the walls fall beneath itself. The rest of the parak now turns. Yehoshua turns to the people, he turns to the Kohanim, he tells them what to do, he gives them the instructions to do exactly this, and the rest of the story I'm going to leave for now. I'm much more interested for today in the Malach and in the conversation about the instructions for the conquest or the takedown of the walls of Yericho. So again, I come back to the question I asked before, which is, what is the purpose of this Malach, of this angel who's speaking to Yehoshua in the end of chapter 5? And essentially what I have is what I would call a difference of opinion in the textual, the parshanut of how to read the text. Meaning, if I look at this from a chapter division perspective, this Malach has to do with chapter 5, and he's all about with some kind of spiritual moment for Yehoshua and the people after Brit Milah, after Korban Pesach, and more or less the story stops there. But if I continue into chapter 6 for one paragraph, and that's the last sentence of this paragraph, then clearly the message of this Malach, this Sar Tzva Hashem, who has come with a sword drawn, has something to do with Yericho. The problem is that the next paragraph reads, Vayomer Hashem el Yehoshua. God spoke to Yehoshua. God spoke to Yehoshua, and he said to him, here is the plan for how to take down Yericho. So what did the Malach do? I have the Malach who speaks to Yehoshua in chapter 5, and then I have connected somehow to Yericho, and then suddenly I have God speaking to Yehoshua and says to him, okay, this is the plan, Kohanim, 7 days, 7 akafas, a little bit of shofar blowing, a little bit of yelling, and the walls come down. So what do I do with this? Understand the problem? Yeah, Makom Kadosh, holy place. Is Yericho a holy place? Why does Yehoshua have to take his shoes off? Is the message of the Malach and the message of God with regards to the conquest of Yericho the same message? Is the Malach delivering that message, or is God delivering that message? It's confusing. So let's try to break this down a little bit. I think the key question, or the question with which we start, is assuming we're talking about Yericho, and again, how is Yericho a Makom Kadosh? I'm not sure. And assuming that we're talking about Sartz Vashem, something to do with the battle that is about to take place, hence I need a ministering angel, and assuming that's what the sword represents, the first question I want to address is the transition between Vayomer Sartz Hashem, this angel who speaks to Yehoshua, and Vav Bet, which is Vayomer Hashem El Yehoshua. God spoke to Yehoshua. What happened in that transition? So if you take a look at the Radak, and here I think I put the source page in the chat room, but I'm going to do it again just in case. We take a look at the Radak, and he's not alone, just as a sample. Vayomer Hashem al Yehoshua, when in the beginning of Perek Vav, when it says that God spoke to Yehoshua, al yedei hamalach hanir alo. The conversation is not directly with God. The conversation is with the Malach. The purpose of this angel is here to transmit to Yehoshua the battle plans for Yericho. That's his goal. His intent is to provide Yehoshua with the instructions for how to conquer the walls of Yericho. Why does it say Vayomer Hashem al Yehoshua? So he explains, because when an angel speaks in God's name, it's as if God is speaking. And so we have this transition between the introduction, which describes the vision, which describes Yehoshua's encounter with the individual he thinks is an Ish, turns out it's a Malach. So there's that conversation about what happened. And then the message isn't coming from the Malach, the message is coming from God, so the text bypasses the details. It doesn't tell us the Malach said in the name of God, it just says Vayomer Hashem. So Hadak goes one step further. He says this is not the only place we find this kind of transition between Malach speaking in the name of God and the text describing it as God speaking. We have other examples of exactly the same phenomena. For example, Metzanu b'malach shenira leGidon. I'll show you that conversation in a moment. Whole conversation between the angel and Gidon. And there too it says, Vayomer elav Hashem. God said to him, and he was clearly speaking through the agency of Hamalach. The reference to the next verse I'll show you in a minute. My name is in the Malach. I am, right? That's something which I'll show you in a moment, where it comes from and what it means. I'll show you where this reference to Shoftim that he's referring to, very important for us, very similar kind of setup, where you have an individual who's talking to a Malach. He may not even know that he's talking to a Malach. We are used to thinking of Malachim as a kind of, we have this almost media-centered, very westernized vision of a Malach with kind of a white cloaked being with wings attached, right? We don't know what a Malach looks like, but when the Malachim interacted with human beings, they looked like human beings. Abraham thought of the 3 Malachim as strangers walking through the desert. Now, you can argue that they were trying to disguise themselves. But we have instances, several in Tanakh, where you have people talking to Malachim. They think they're talking to human beings. and then suddenly they realize they're talking to angels. There are two such examples in Sefer Shoftim alone. The first is Gidon. So let's talk about the story in Shoftim Perek Vav. Shoftim Perek Vav, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael hara b'nei Hashem, vayitnem Hashem b'yad Midyan, sheva shanim, classic cycle of the book of Shoftim. Israel sinned, God gave them, punished them by enabling a foreign power to oppress them for a bit. And the description of the Vayizaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, they cried out to God. Vayizaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem al adot Midyan, vayishlach Hashem ish navi al b'nei Yisrael. As they cried out to God, God responded, and He sent them a navi. Clearly, here, ish navi, it says a man, a prophet, not a malach. And this navi comes with a message. Vayomer lehem kol mar Hashem. A navi speaks in the name of God, so he says, "Thus says God." I took you out of Egypt, I brought you out of the house of bondage, and I saved you. I took the oppressors of Canaan, and I removed them from before you, and I gave you their land. And I said to you, don't worship other gods, don't serve the gods of the Amorites, etc. You didn't listen to me. And that's where the message of the Navi ends. I told you not to worship other gods, you didn't listen to me, period. That's missing a piece at the end, right? It's missing, therefore, okay. But that's not a subject for now. Then we get to Pasuk Yud Aleph. Vayavo malach Hashem vayeshev tachat ha'elah shebe'ofra shel Yoash avi Ezri. The malach Hashem came and sat under a tree. Now, the confusing part here is that the word malach normally means malach, angel, but the word malach can also mean messenger. The Navi, Malachi, is called Malachi because he is my messenger. So we were talking to a Navi before. Now this messenger of God, Malach Hashem, comes, sits under a tree. Is it the same Navi or is it a Malach? We don't know yet. And Gidon is there, and he is pressing his wine press. Vayera elav Malach Hashem. Malach Hashem appeared to him. Now that sounds like an angel. Vayomer elav Hashem imecha gibor hachayil. And he says to Gidon, God is with you, mighty man of valor. Now, it's self-evident from the continuation of the story that Gidon has no idea that he's talking to a malach. Because his response is not only harsh, but if he was talking to a malach, extraordinarily disrespectful. Because Gidon's response is, Vayomer elav Gidon, Bi Adoni, my master. Really? Honestly? God is with us? If God was with us, why would we be suffering so? Where are all of God's great miracles? Where is God who took us out of Egypt? He's abandoned us and handed us over to Midian. God is with us. A joke. Vayifen elav Hashem. God turned to him and said, Lech bekochacha zeh. This is your strength. Go v'shata tiso mikaf Midian. Go and save Israel from the hands of Midian. Halo shlachticha, I am sending you. Now suddenly Gidon realizes he's not talking to a guy sitting under the tree. Vayomer elav bi Hashem. Now he's talking to God. Right? You see the difference between Bi Adoni, my master, and Bi Adon, right? Hashem. Now he starts a whole conversation, very similar to Moshe at the burning bush. How am I going to save Israel? I am the poorest of my tribe. I am the smallest, the youngest of my household, my father's household. And God says to him exactly, this is a very similar conversation to Moshe at the burning bush. Vayomer elav Hashem, ki eyemach, I will be with you. V'kitat midyan ki shechad. You'll take care of Midian without a problem, like just no worries. Vayomer elav im namatzati chem b'nech v'asita li ot shetam medaber imi. So now he says, okay, I need a sign that it is really you speaking to me. It's a little funny, right? He's talking to God, and he wants proof that he's talking to God. So he says, stay here for a moment, like Abraham with the angels. You stay here for a second. I'm just going to go grab lunch. And we'll have lunch together. I'm sitting here. God is sitting there, yeah, because he's the malach under the tree. So Gidon comes back. Exactly like Abraham with the angels in Parsha Vayera. He makes them a whole meal, unleavened cakes, and ephah of meal. Habasar sambasal, v'amarak samba parur. There's meat and there's fit and there's soup. And he brings it all out. Vayotze elav el tachat ha'elah. Who's sitting under the elah? The malach. I thought he was talking to God. Vayomer elav Hashem. Vayifne elav Hashem. Vayifne elav Hashem. And he's still talking to this individual under the tree. Vayomer elav malach ha'elokim. The angel says to Gidon, Kach ha'dabasar v'tamatzot v'nachal ha'sela zeh v'tamarak shvoch v'yasken. Take all the cakes, put them on the rock, pour out the soup. He takes the staff, touches it with the edge of the staff. The rock comes out from the fire. The fire comes out from the rock. As it consumed the offering, the angel disappeared. Gidon's response, Vayomer Gidon, Ki malach Hashemu. Ah, I get it. I've been talking to a malach. Now I understand. Vayomer Gidon, Hashem Elokim. Ki al ken ra'iti malach Hashem panim al panim. Whoa, alas, I have seen the angel of God face to face. Vayomer lo Hashem, shalom lecha al tira, lo tamut, don't worry, you won't die, you'll be fine, you'll survive this. You'll be okay. And then Gidon builds Mizbech. It's a fascinating little story. Well, one thing is clear, that at no point is God directly speaking to him. Even when it says, Vayifne elav Hashem, he's still talking to the Malach. It's just the Malach is speaking now in the name of Hashem. So we call that Vayifne elav Hashem. And clearly he thinks he's talking to a human being because he offers him lunch, and then he thinks, I assume he thinks he's talking to the same Navi you spoke at the beginning of the chapter and came to the people. Vayishlach Hashem ish Navi. Only when he realizes that he's actually speaking to an angel, whatever that is, then suddenly he realizes now he's in trouble. You have exactly the same transition, by the way, at the burning bush. Take a look at the burning bush. Moshe was a shepherd. He comes to Har Chorev. Vayera malach Hashem elav bilabat esh mitoch hasneh. He sees an angel of God in a fire in the burning bush. The fire is burned, the bush is burning, but not consuming. Let me go and see this great sight. Vayar Hashem kisar li'ot. When Hashem saw that he turned to see, Vayikra elav Elokim mitoch hasneh, God called to him from the bush and said, Vayomer Moshe Moshe Vayomer hineni. He says, here I am. And then he instructs him, Al tikravalam, don't come too close. Shal na lecha mi al raglecha, ki emakom asher ata omed alav admat kodeshu. Sound familiar? Don't get too close. The land that you are standing on is holy ground. I am the Lord your God. I am the God of your fathers, etc., etc., etc. V'yomer Hashem. And he gives some signs. A whole conversation. So the Mefarshim immediately pick up on the transition between Pasuk Bet and Pasuk Daled. Vayera malach Hashem elav. Vayera Hashem. Who's speaking? Is it the angel or is it God? It's a machloket in the Mefarshim. But if I showed you the Mefarshim, here's the Rashbam. Actually, here's the Rashbam. Actually, let's do it I'll have the translations here. Vayar Hashem kisar lirot. God saw that he turned to see. He spoke to him. Who spoke to him? Says the Rashbam. Hamalach koreh al shmo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The angel is speaking on behalf of God. The angel is called God in this verse because he's carrying out God's assignment and message. So when it says God saw, God spoke, it means the angel of God said, the angel of God saw and spoke. Ibn Ezra says the exact same thing. Vayar Hashem, v'nikra hamalach b'shem nichbad. The angel is called by the revered name in a similar sense to the phrase, you quoted this earlier, Kishmi b'kirbo, my name is in him. We'll talk about that phrase in a second. V'chein hamalach shenir'a legidon. This is exactly the same. The idea that it's the same. Ibn Ezra, the Radak even quotes the same language. The notion that even though God seems to be speaking in the beginning of chapter 6, in fact, it's not. There's no two conversations going on here, according to the Mefarshim. There's one conversation. The Malach appears to Yehoshua in the form of a fiery angel, chabosh lufa biyado, with a sword drawn. Actually, I don't know. It doesn't say anything about fire. With the sword drawn. And he comes to him and he identifies himself as the Sar Tzavah Hashem, the ministering angel of God. So there's some tzavah, there's some army, there's some military context to this. He's in Yericho, and Yericho is surrounded. The Malach is involved. Remember, I showed you the Masoret that has that as one paragraph. And then Vayomer Hashem, God gives him the instructions for the fall of Yericho. I'm assuming, says the Mefarshim, this is exactly the point, that the battle plans for Yericho are in fact the battle plans that are delivered to him through the agency of this ministering angel of God's army, Sar Tzavah Hashem. That's the takeaway of all of this discussion, with parallel to Gidon, parallel to Manoah, parallel to the burning bush, is that when it says that God spoke to Yehoshua and told him this is how to take down the walls of Yericho, it's actually the same Malach speaking to Yehoshua, and God is speaking through the Malach. Why is that so important to me? Because it will change the nature of the message that Yehoshua is hearing. The message coming from God as a separate prophecy to the vision of the angel is different than the message being delivered by the Sar Tzavah Hashem. And what I would like to do is explore what happens to this message when it is being delivered by this angel called the Sar Tzavah Hashem. Also interesting to note, and I just want to touch on this for a minute, because this comes back to what both Radak and Ibn Ezra made reference to this. Yehoshua is not unaccustomed to engaging with God, prophecy, and angels. We're not talking about a nobody like Gidon who's never had an encounter with God in his life, and suddenly he sees a malach comes to him and he thinks he's talking to a human being. Or Manoach, for the same effort, right? Remember the story of Manoach, father of Shimshon. There is in Shoftim Perek Yud Gimel, There's a certain person, his name is Manoach, his wife was barren, the angel appeared to her with instructions. You're going to have a child, and the child is going to be a Nazir, and you have to be a Nazir because the child is going to be a Nazir, and this child is going to save Israel from the hands of the Plishtim. Fine, Shimsha. Okay. What does she do? Look how she describes the encounter. Vatomer ha'isha. Vatomer le'isha. The woman comes to her husband and says, Ish ha'elokim ba'elai. I was approached by a man of God. Ish ha'elokim is a term for a Navi. Umar'eyu kimar'e malach elokim. He looked angel-like. He looked angelic. He was like a Navi who looked angelic. It clearly said before Malach Hashem. Unless you want to say it's a messenger, not a Malach, but in the end of the story, we know it's a Malach. And I didn't ask its name, and I didn't ask where he's from, but he gave me a whole message. Okay. Manoach offers a prayer. Vayata Manoach al Hashem v'yomar, Bi Hashem. Isha Elokim asher shalachta. You remember that man, that Navi, that man of God that you sent to my wife? Let him come again. I need to know the instructions. V'yorenu ma na'aseh lana'ar yulad. Why he needs to know this again, why he needs to repeat performance of the prophecy is not our issue for now. But he appears. Vayomer Manoach atay avod v'recha. Vayomer malach Hashem al Manoach. Again, it's a malach Hashem who's talking to Manoach. And he says to Manoach, whatever I told her, that's what you have to listen to. Manoach's response, Vayomer Manoach al malach Hashem, Natzrana otach v'naseh lefanecha gedi izim. Why don't you stay for lunch? So you see the recurring pattern from Abraham's precedent at the with the angels in Parsha Vayera. Gideon offered this Navi lunch, discovered that it was a Malach. Manoach is about to offer this Isha Elokim lunch, gedi izim, and the Malach says, "I don't eat bread. I don't eat. If you want to bring it as an offering, bring it as an offering." And here it spells it out. Lo yada Manoach ki malach Hashem hu. Manoach had no idea that he was talking to an angel. And then he says, Vayomer Manoach al malach Hashem, Mishmecha, what's your name? Ki yavod v'cha v'chibadnucha. When your prophecy comes true, we want to throw you a kiddush. We want to give you some kavod. But I don't know who you are. What's your name? Where do you live? And he says, what are you asking me for my name for? It's a mystery. So he places the lunch on the rock. And a wondrous thing happens. Manoach and his wife are watching. And as the flame goes up, and the angel goes up in the fire up to heavens. And then they realize that they're talking to Manoach, to an angel. As Yada Manoach ki malach Hashem. It's almost the exact same story as Gideon. You have to ask the question why it's repeated. But you get the sense these are people who have never encountered a malach before. A person who's never encountered any kind of spiritual encounter with a malach or with a navi. So I understand that they're confused. They don't necessarily understand the difference between a malach and an Isha Elokim. But Yehoshua, suggesting in chapter 5 when Yeshua sees him and he says to him, and he sees a man standing there with the chabosh l'fabiyado, with the sword up drawn, and he says to him, "Halanu atayim litzarenu." Is he really think he's talking to an ish? Does he think he's talking to a man? It's possible. It's entirely possible that he thinks that this malach is disguised as a man, and he thinks he's talking to a human being. And so he doesn't know who he is, and he says, Alanu atalim tzarenu, and he identifies himself as a ministering angel of God. Maybe he revealed his cloak, maybe he took off his disguise, and suddenly Yehoshua realizes what it is, and he fell down, and he starts to bow. That's entirely possible. But there's another possibility. What I wanted to suggest is that Yehoshua is not on the level of Gideon and Manoach and all these other encounters that Gideon, even Moshe at the burning bush, has never encountered a malach. You have to integrate into a conversation with God slowly. So it's a malach in the burning bush. It's not panim or panim. It's not face to face. Moshe is a long way off from that level of nevuah where he can talk to God face to face. At the burning bush, the first you say he's talking to a malach. Yehoshua sees this malach, and I'm going to assume for the moment the possibility that he actually knows that he's talking to an angel. But if that's the case, how do you understand the question, Halanu atayim l'tzarenu? Are you for us or against us? Yehoshua is marching on Yericho. They were in Gilgal. They crossed the river. They spent 3 days with Brit Milah and the Korban Pesach, and now they're ready to march on Yericho. They start the march. They surround Yericho. They besiege Yericho. And suddenly this malach appears with a sword drawn, facing Yehoshua. And Yehoshua stops, and he says to him, Halanu atayim l'tzreinu, are you on our side or on their side? What does that mean? Possible to have an angel of God who comes not to assist us, but to hinder us? Is that possible? And the answer is yes. It is possible. In fact, not only is it possible, it's one of two possibilities. It's a 50%. Meaning, both the Radak and the Ibn Ezra made reference to a verse in Shmot Perek Chav Gimel, talking about the connection between the Malach and God's message embedded in the message of the Malach. And that verse is the phrase Kishmi Bikirbo. The Radak made reference to it, and so did the Ibn Ezra. So let's take a look at where that's referring. Shmot Chav Gimel. This is the end of Pashat Mishpatim, right before the right after Ma'amad Sinai, the Mishpatim, and then we have the Mishkan, and then we'll have the Chet HaEgel. Shmot chapter 23. Hinei anochi shaleach malach lefanecha. Behold, God says to Moshe at the end of Pashat Mishpatim, I'm going to send a messenger, a malach, before you. Lishmor chavaderech, to guard you along the way. And to bring you into the land that I promised, that I prepared for you. Hishamer mipanav, be very careful. Shma b'kolo, listen to whatever he says. Al tamer bo, don't rebel against him. Ki lo yisal afishechem, he will not forgive your iniquities easily. Ki shmi b'kirbo, because he carries my name in his midst. My Shechina is represented by this malach. If you listen to his voice and you do everything that I say to you, I will make an enemy of your enemies and an adversary of your adversaries. My malach will go before you, and he'll fight your battles. He'll bring you to the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites and I will destroy them before you. And while there's a machloket in the Rishonim, whether this malach we are referring to is a literal malach or a messenger like a navi, the Rivash, one of the Balei Tosfot, says that the reference here is to a navi, shaliach, right, who will accompany the people. The Rashbam and most of the Mefarshim say that the reference here is to a malach, literally. And the Rashbam on this pasuk says, "Hinei shalech malachim lefanecha kidchtiv b'Yehoshua ki ani svar tzva Hashem antabati lo shiet Yisrael." The two stories play off each other. The Mefarshim link the two. The Rashbam says, "Go take a look at what it says in Shmot Chav Gimel." Shmot Chav Gimel, Rashbam says, "Go take a look at what it says in Yehoshua." There's an angel who comes to accompany our battle, Sar Tzva Hashem. Okay. 10 chapters later, after Chet HaEgel, and after God's anger, and after they reject the rejection, and after finally Moshe enables God to forgive them. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe. God says to Moshe, Lech alemizeh. Go ascend, go up, go to the land, go march to the land of Israel. Atav ya'am asher elitem me'eretz Mitzrayim. Al ha'aretz asher nishba'ta lav aham Yitzchak ul Yaakov lemolech zarchat. Then go to the land they promised to your forefathers. V'shalachti lefanecha malach. I will send a malach before you. And he will expel all the Canaanites before you. Same malach. Here is a malach who will come and he'll bring them to the land of the 7 nations of Canaan. Here is a malach who will come and send you to this and dispel the 7 nations of Canaan. With one difference. Because I will not go in your midst. For you are a stubborn people, lest I destroy you along the way. So whereas the Malach in Perek Chav Gimel represents God in the midst, Kishmi Bikirbo, the Malach in Perek Lamed Gimel represents the fact that God has moved away from them, sent the Malach instead, and said, I'm not coming. Do this on your own. Here's my Malach, go figure it out. Whatever that means, it's the exact opposite of Kishmi B'Kirbo. Does everybody see that? Same passage, same idea, same malach, but post Chet Egel, God says the malach serves a different purpose. Beforehand, the malach was there to represent God's presence in their midst, like the Ananei Kavod and the Eish and all the miracles of Yetziat Mitzrayim. God is with them. I will be with you. Shmat Lamed Gimel, after Chet Egel, God says, here, you go on your own. I'm not coming with you. Here's my malach. Here's some level of divine providence, but you're on your own. And the people refuse. Moshe refuses. The people refuse. They refuse to move until God takes this back. But this is a powerful message. I have 2 different paradigms of the role of the malach to help or to hinder. And that's precisely what Yehoshua says to them. Yehoshua comes to them and he says he sees this Isha Medlin Agdo, assuming for the moment that he realizes that it's a malach, which I have to imagine Yehoshua is capable of discerning the difference between a human being and a malach. And he says to him, Alanu atam letzarenu, are you, put it in these terms, are you the angel of Shmot Perek Chav Gimel, or are you the angel of Shmot Perek Lamed Gimel? Are you for us, or are you here to hinder us, hold us back? Which angel are you? I was told, Yehoshua was told, that this mission to the land of Israel would be accompanied by a malach. That was told to them in Chumash. Only question is which? The malach of Perek Chav Gimel, Lanu, ours, or the malach of Perek Lamed Gimel, in which God turns his back on them because they're too sinful and stubborn.
But the malach is talking only to Moshe. Who says that Yehoshua knows?
He's talking about the malach that's going to go with them to the land of Israel. The fact that Moshe gets replaced by Yehoshua, that's a 40-year story, but this is long before that. But the idea is that this is the accompanying malach into the story.
Yeah, but I think in both places the malach is going to help Israel. It just sounds like in Shemot Kaf Gimel, it's a much closer.
I don't know what that means. Closer, less close. I don't know what that means. But here I've translated it. Here I've translated it into a very practical context. Are you a malach of midat harachamim, a malach of assistance, a malach that represents the shchinos marching into battle with us? Or are you here to tell us that God has abandoned us, that we've made a mistake, that you're the malach that's going to come because God is not here, the malach hamavis, whoever you want to call it, right? That's exactly the context. Are you mitata din or mitata rachamim? Are you a malach to destroy or a malach to build? I'll give you another example of the same phenomenon. Hang on a second. Let me give you another example of exactly the same phenomenon. Yehoshua, I keep coming back to the story of Abraham in the beginning of Parshat Vayera. Fascinating story. Abraham is sitting after the Brit Milah, just like Yehoshua is sitting after Brit Milah, and 3 people in Malachim disguised as angels. Angels disguised as people come to him, right? They tell him he's going to have a child, and there's a whole encounter. Then, what happens after that? They turn to go to
Sdom.
Sodom.
Sodom, correct? Okay, wait a second. Let's make sure we understand this correctly. There are three people. God appears to him. Okay, three people. He goes running after them. He has a conversation with them. They're done. Parak Yutet vayavo shnei hamalachim Sodoma, and the two messengers came to Sodom. What just happened? We lose one along the way.
One disappeared.
One disappeared. Yeah, I get it. One disappeared. Why? Says Rashi. Fascinating. Says Rashi. Only two malachim came to Sodom. What happened to the third? He went home. Why? Achat lashchit et Sodom. One malach came to destroy Sodom. V'achat latzil et Lot, and one came to destroy Lot, to save Lot. V'hu oto sheba l'rapot Avraham, and he's the same malach who came to heal Avraham. V'ashlishi sheba l'vaser et Sarah, and the third one who came to inform Sarah she's going to have a child. Kevan she'asa shlichuto nistalik lo. He finished. He did his mission. He went home. This is based on a medrash that says, Ein malach echad oseh shtei shlichot. One malach can't do two missions. And two malachim can't do one mission. V'shnei malach ein shnei malachim osim shlichut achat. Michael came to tell him about the child, left.
But that's midrash. That's
One
not
second. I understand that, but it's medrash, but it's also text. I still have to figure out why I need two malachim to save Lot and to destroy Sodom. Right? The medrash is not coming out of nowhere. Yes, the medrash identifies them by name. Michal, Gavriel, Raphael. Why we name them? Why? Because the only malachim named by name in all of Tanakh appears in Sefer Daniel is Michal and Gavriel. Right? Gavriel nishtalech lafoch et Sodom. Gavriel was sent to destroy Sodom, hence the word Gvura. And Raphael, from the word Refuah, comes to save Lot. Fine, so it's medrash. But I still have the same question. Why do I need two malachim to destroy Sodom and to save Lot? Forget the Avram for a second. Why can't one malach save Sodom and destroy Sodom and save Lot? Why do I need two? So the malach says, so the medrash says, because one angel can't do two messages. I don't understand. Malachim are limited. What does that mean? So I'm going to make a suggestion to you. I haven't seen this anywhere really, but I think it's pshat in the medrash.
Oh, yes.
It's not that one malach can't do two messages. It's that malachim have a particular focus of either midat hadin or midat harachamim. They either come to help or they come to hinder. They either come to destroy as a function of din, or they come to assist and enhance as a function of rachamim and ava, as chesed. Those are the missions of the malachim. They represent God's midot. The malachim represent the mechanism by which God runs the world. God is both din and rachamim, but only God can be both din and rachamim at the same time. The malachim represent one or the other. And so you have in Shmot Chav Gimel, the malach who comes in the context of Mamad Hasina, Kishmi B'Kirbo, my name is in him, is with him, and therefore there is a malach who will accompany them into the land of Israel. And in Shmot Lamed Gimel, after Chet Ego, God says, I'm abandoning you. I'm not coming with you. Ki lo ale b'kirbecha, whatever it means. But it's the opposite of Kishmi B'Kirbo. And so the malach represents something alternative to Kishmi B'Kirbo, my name is in him, and it's represented by Lo Ale B'Kirbecha, to use the language of Sefer Breshit. One was there to destroy Sodom, and one was there to save Lot. Says Yehoshua to the malach, which are you? Are you the malach to destroy Sodom? Are you the malach to save Lot? Are you the malach midat harachamim or midat hadin? Halanu atayim letzarenu. We started a march on Yericho. Now let's put it into the context of the real political military context here. We've started a march on Yericho. Vayi biyot Yehoshua b'Yericho. If I include the next text, v'Yericho sugeratum sugeret mifnei b'nei Israel. They had encircled Yericho. They had besieged Yericho. Understand the significance of that moment. Yehoshua enters into the land of Israel. We're going to come back to this point several times in the course of our study of Yehoshua. Yehoshua enters into the land of Israel. He has two strategic challenges before him, and he has to figure out a way around them. Technically, one is tactical and one is strategic, but he has two challenges before him. The cities of the land of Israel are walled cities. How does an army of foot soldiers conquer cities that have walls to protect them? That's challenge number one. And we're going to see over and over again various mechanisms by which Yehoshua achieves that goal without the miracles of the walls tumbling down, right? To draw the army out and to trick them, etc. All kinds of tactical things that he employs to get the army to leave the city. But that's the first challenge, is the walls of the city. The second challenge Yehoshua has is he's fighting against time. Time is not his friend. He needs to conquer the land of Israel quickly because he cannot allow the city-states of the various cities in Yericho, in the land of Israel, to gather together as an alliance of a force against him. They have the advantage, Israel has the advantage, as long as they're fighting one city, one army. If they're fighting all of them together, they become outnumbered. So he's fighting two tactical challenges at the same time. One is the wall, and one is time. They are mutually exclusive because they contradict each other. Because how do you typically take out a walled city? Right? Yoav sat around the siege of Ammon for 2 years before David went back to Yerushalayim and fell into the trap with Bathsheba. A walled city is a problem because a walled city takes time to besiege the population. And he's racing the clock. We're going to come back to that theory, that statement, we're going to come to many times. He's facing the challenge of the unification, the unity of the armies of Canaan and the walled cities. So he starts, V'yot Yehoshua b'Yericho. He comes and he says, okay, first walled city. Do you remember the spies with Rachav? What did they tell Rachav to do to save herself? Hide inside the walls. The last place in the world you want to tell somebody to hide if you know in advance that the walls are going to be are going to fall in an earthquake. Yehoshua has no clue that the walls are destined to come down in an earthquake. Neither do the spies. In his mind, okay, first walled city, first challenge. What do? It's a siege. They besieged the city. They marched in Yericho. And as they're marching to Yericho, suddenly between them and the city stands a malach with the sword. So he says, which angel are you? Are you
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, hang on 1 second. Let me just finish the
Yeah.
thought.
Okay, sure.
To which the Malach's response now, and we're going to have to analyze this next week because we won't be able to do it today, but the Malach's now response is going to become the focus of our discussion moving forward. The Malach's response is, Vayomer lo, Giatni sartzva Hashem. I am the ministering angel of God. Atavati. I have come now. That sentence seems to be the ultimate non sequitur. There's not one phrase in that answer that relates to the question that Yehoshua asked. He asked, are you friend or foe? What did he answer? No, I'm the angel of God. I've come now. Okay. I'm in the army of God. I represent the army of God. I've got a sword in my hand. I've come now. Are you friend or foe? The question still stands. How does that answer the question? Let alone the extraordinary polemic that is generated by the Medrash on that pasuk, and we will explore that B'ezrat Hashem next week. It's one of the most dramatic polemics in Sefer Yehoshua, led to a comment of the Radak that has we'll explore next week. Much to be said. But we're going to stop here, and I'm going to take the answer to the question that somebody posed. What was the question? Somebody had a hand raised to the question. I stopped a moment ago and I said, hang on a second.
I did.
Okay.
I'm reading, like Pshuto Shel Mikra. I'm looking at Pshuto, and I don't understand why we had to do this whole thing. And, like if Yehoshua sees somebody with a sword, and it's normal to ask, who are you? And then the answer is something that Yehoshua could grasp because he's a military person. So he said Sar Tzava. So instead of saying I'm a malach, I'm saying I'm a military man. And that makes sense to Yehoshua. So now he's listening. And he says, I'm coming from God. So I don't understand why we cannot go with...
Are you suggesting that this is not a... Wait a second. Are you suggesting that it's not a malach at all?
No, I'm saying that Yehoshua saw him at the beginning and thought that it was a person. He asked him that it was a person. If he, for or against, which is a normal thing to do, especially if they're busy putting on a siege. And the guy says, "No, I'm an angel of God." But if for like Dibra Torah Belshon Bnei Adam, like he's talking to the way that Yehoshua understands, which is like I'm saying.
I suggested that's possible. I said that's one possibility.
So it seems to me that like instead of going through this whole thing with all the why can't we look at it like really the way the story goes, which is so simple.
Again, I'm not necessarily making it less simple. I'm trying to understand the answer and what comes next. At the end of the day, two things are important to me. Right? Whether you want to take this question as Yehoshua recognizes the angel or he doesn't recognize the angel. Okay, maybe he's like Gidon the Manoach. He thinks he's talking to a person, and then he realizes he's talking to an angel. That's why he falls on his face.
Well, maybe Abraham also, because he washed their feet. You don't need to wash.
But they're the disguise. They're for sure they're the disguise intentionally. So.
Right, okay. Exactly. So they don't always know.
Okay, but it's possible. But here's my issue, and this for us is going to be very important.
Yeah, where's the issue? That's what I'm trying to understand. Where is the?
Well, there's a lot of issues. Number one, the most important thing for us is to recognize that this side of Hashem is connected directly to the continuation in chapter 6 of the story of the conquest that in fact he's the one who's delivering the message to Yehoshua that this is the way we're going to conquer the walls of Yericho. Now, we think that that's normal, that this is the normal way. You take down the walls of Yericho with hakafot, etc. We're going to see how not normal that is. And therefore, it's an extraordinary, it basically puts the brakes on Yehoshua's army. So he's standing there with the sword to put the brakes on Yehoshua's army, to tell Yehoshua, stop marching. And that's why he says, what do you mean stop marching? He's standing there with the sword, but the sword's not facing Yericho. The sword's facing him.
Right.
So that's the first. So I suggested that it may even be to the case where he doesn't even know that he thinks he's talking to an angel. He just doesn't know what kind of angel he's talking to because the angel's coming at him, not at Yericho. He's facing the wrong direction. So from our perspective, what's important is the reference that Sartz of Hashem here, the Malach here, is in fact the voice of Vayomer Hashem al Yehoshua. That's a machloket, but that's very important for us because we're going to build on this description of Yericho's, of the fall of the walls of Yericho, to understand the message of, I keep having to jump chapters because it's two different chapters, but whatever, to understand the message of Ki ani Sartz of Hashem atabati. That's point number one. And that's why the Masoret divides, this chapter division is so
right. Okay, I agree.
In the context of it. That's the most important piece. The other piece to recognize is that, and that was a suggestion that in the end, this conversation, the last piece that we did, this conversation between Yehoshua and the Malach, it's possible that he doesn't know that he's talking to a Malach, but it's also possible that he does, because both the Radak and the Ibn Ezra link this transition between this transition between the Malach speaking here and God speaking in chapter 6, they link that same transition to the phrase Kishmi Bikirbo in Shmot Chav Gimel.
I think it's significant that the angel introduces himself as Satzva Hashem as opposed to Satzva Elokim, meaning the Satzva Midat HaRachamim.
That could be. That could be part of the answer also. Well, it's called usually Satzva Hashem, but we're going to have to explore what the Satzva Hashem is altogether. That's a whole shiur into itself.
Rabbi,
Who and what is this concept called Satzva Hashem? Yes, question.
I have a quick question. This image or description of a malach in Charbo Shlufa, I may be wrong, but right away it brought to me the image of the malach in front of in Balak, in front of that. That's
Correct.
exactly the same
Excellent.
description, and he serves as a barrier,
Correct.
as you're
Excellent.
saying, to going
And the
forward.
same vision, by the way, the same vision as the. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing because I don't need this now. You are correct 100%. There's the vision of Balak and the angel. There's the vision of the angel who stands in front of Gan Eden.
That's the other vision that I was going to mention.
With the fiery sword,
Also
guard
as a
the
with the
access.
cherev and
Nobody
as
comes in.
barrier. Mhm.
So there are all kinds of images of an angel standing with the sword that's not friendly or that's not on our side. And so I agree. I think that there's enough background and enough parallel to say, at least as a question, again, we could read it two ways. We could read it as Yehoshua knows who he's talking to. Doesn't know who he's talking to. He thinks he's talking to a human being. The moment he realizes he's talking to an angel, he bows down, his tone changes. That's possible. What I'm suggesting is that it's also possible that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, that there's also this reference to the question, what is this angel coming to do? He stopped the army in its tracks. The army was marching. And this malach comes and says, stop. We're going to take 7 days. We're going to walk around the walls. We're going to... Right? Why? So that we're going to have to explore. But that malach's facing them. He's not facing Yericho. He's not standing there with going charge. Right? He's standing there with the sword facing them. The Yehoshua wouldn't have said Alanu Atam Litzavenu if he was facing the other way. So that's where I came to the suggestion that there's a difference between malachim who serve in the role of Midat HaRachamim and malachim who serve in the role of Midat.
And the malach in the Bilam story changes the whole trajectory of the story. The same, we could maybe make a parallel there. It's very interesting. Also, Bilam sees the malach and with the sword and he bows down. So there are a lot of parallel languages. Sure. Yeah.
All right. Next week, B'ezrat Hashem, we will pick up from the answer of the malach Sar Tzva Hashem Atabati, and we're going to get into a little bit of a contemporary polemic with it, but very famous Gemara in Eruvin. So there's much to unpack. So we will, B'ezrat Hashem, continue next week.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Have a good week.
Thank you
You
very
too.
much.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Thank you. Have a good night. Thank you.
You too. You too. Thank you.